You're listening to Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. We're coming to you from the unceded traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations around Vancouver, BC. I'm your host, Bernadine Fox, and this is the show that dares to change how we think about mental health. Welcome to Rethreading Madness.
When I've never been further, knowing what the hell I'm gonna do. When I can't seem to find my way under or over or through.
You're listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and today I'm speaking with Jodi Gray, who is the 2023 Courage to Come Back Award winner in the category of mental health, who I got the pleasure of seeing at the gala get up and get her award, and it was very, very powerful. Welcome, Jodi, to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. Actually, it really is my pleasure. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Certainly. So I moved to Canada from North Carolina. I grew up in North Carolina, moved to Canada about 25 years ago, and love Canada. Lived here since in Edmonton, Victoria, Pender Island, and now Vancouver. And yeah, growing up in North Carolina was difficult, but I made it through, of course, and felt different the whole time I was growing up, and realized in the last 10 years or so that I was transgender, and I transitioned about 8 years ago. Haven't looked back since, so I've been so happy with the transition. So I am a trans woman, and yeah, what else would you like to know?
That's pretty good. North Carolina is the Bible Belt, conservative family, Christian. Yes.
Yes. Very conservative, yes.
That must have been difficult being a trans woman, living in that kind of milieu.
It was very difficult. I didn't realize I was trans at the time. That was pre-internet, and I had no point of reference to say that this is what I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew I was different. I knew somehow I was different, and different was frowned upon in the Christian church that I was going to.
What do you think they would have seen that marked you as different, or was it just something you felt inside?
It's something I felt inside. I tried very hard to hide it from everyone else. I didn't want anyone to see it. I was afraid they could. But yeah, I tried to. I never felt particularly male, but I tried to play the part.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout my life. I've tried to play the part. So I've never really, until the last 8 years, I've never really let that guard down and relaxed and been so.
So transitioning allowed you to embrace who you were. And so if I extrapolate from what you just said, then that would mean that you now are relaxed. Am I?
That's correct. Yes, I am. I can relax. I don't have to put on a mask when I go out. I can be myself now, and that's really yeah. It's hard to describe that feeling because I've spent so many years trying not to be myself. That it really feels good to be myself now and to be able to show the world who I am.
Yeah, that's kind of like settling into your own feet.
It is, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Prior to transitioning, you were married and had a child?
I was married and had a child in Edmonton. It wasn't a very good marriage. So there was she abused me, tried to push me downstairs, physically abused me, mentally abused me. And finally, I just had enough, and I had to leave. And that was when my son was 2 years old, and well, about a year. I'm sorry, and I saw him up until he was two, and then she kept me from seeing him. So I haven't seen him since he was 2 years old. And
Did she keep you from seeing him because you were a transgendered woman or
she she didn't know I was trans at the time,
uh
and that was before I transitioned. So that was um, James would be 20. James will be turning 24 this year. So that was 22 years ago.
mhm.
So yeah, she didn't know I was trans. I didn't know I was trans at the time, but I was starting to get an idea. But yeah, she kept me from seeing him because I don't know why. It was out of spite.
Mhm.
The issues were between her and I, had nothing to do with James, but she drew James into it and used James as a weapon against me.
That's really sad. I'm sorry to hear that when mothers do that because children need everybody in their lives. They just do. And this life is hard enough as it is. To remove a loving person from them is cruel. Actually, that's my opinion. It's cruel.
It is, and I blamed myself for years that I didn't fight hard enough. I didn't do everything I could, which I absolutely did, and I know that in my heart. But yeah, it was easy to blame myself for years and years for not being able to see James. And
But you went to court and you got you were had joint custody, I believe. Is that right?
we had joint custody. I went to court. I spent every penny I had financially, and I was spent emotionally as well, fighting for James. So I absolutely did everything I could do. Um, I love James very much and still do. And yeah, did would have done anything that I could to keep him in my life, and I
Mhm.
did do everything I could.
Yeah, it does sound like that. You did take her to court. You did do all of those things, and she just didn't comply. And the court, by the sounds of it, wasn't willing to help you out in enforcing that.
That's right.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry that happened. When we talked about this show and having you come on and talk about transgender issues, the one of the things that you said that you wanted to be clear about was to say that being transgender is not a mental illness, that any mental health issues or challenges you have are not because you're transgender.
That's absolutely correct. Being transgender has nothing to do with my mental health issues. I was depressed and anxious as a child, and that was compounded by losing my son, and that's where the issues really lie, as far as the mental health concerns. So my diagnosis is bipolar 2. Being transgender really has nothing to do with mental health, but it's really hard to separate the two because transgender people do um, do have mental health concerns, proportionately more than the general population.
When you say they have more proportionately more mental health concerns, why do you suppose that is?
I personally think a lot of it has to do with the trauma of growing up. I mean, I grew up in a conservative Christian household, but many others are growing up in households where they don't know if it's safe for them to be trans or not.
Mm-hmm.
And many are rejected by their families when they come out as trans. Many are rejected by their friends, by their communities. So there's really a lot of a lot of rejection, a lot of trauma to face when you're coming out as trans.
And if we take society way back, I mean, I can look at myself, having been born in the late 50s, growing up in the 60s, sort of coming to age in the 70s, you know, on the prairie. Um, it wasn't like Vancouver. I don't know what Vancouver was like then, but I know on the prairie, it was very conservative. And you had men, you had women, boys and girls, and men married women and women married men, and the idea of being gay or transgender was so far away from anything that was considered okay. You couldn't, as a woman, you couldn't even sort of appreciate or look at another woman with anything other than the absolute nothing, or else you were considered to be a lesbian. You just could not. It was so clear. Being a lesbian, being gay, any of those things was completely not going to be okay. So taking that, even one step further, because I can only do that by extrapolating what that's like to be in the wrong body. It would just put you out in the biosphere in terms of trying to come to terms with it or recognizing it or even having a framework for it.
It does. I struggle sometimes with the wrong body scenario because um although I have had surgery, I'm quite happy with my body.
Mm-hmm.
Um
Well, tell me about that, because for someone like me, that is a common way of understanding it, that people were born female when they were male. So the concept is the wrong body. But I happily would like to hear what how you would define that.
yeah, so I was assigned male at birth. A doctor looked at me and without asking me anything, decided that I was male.
Mm-hmm.
And that was wrong. And that's the only way I know how to really describe it is the doctor was incorrect. I'm female, and really the doctor shouldn't have had that power to look at me and decide who I was
And they
just
do that,
based
of
on
course, just based on body parts, right? That's,
exactly,
you know,
exactly.
and
And people are born with all different body parts. It's um some females are born with a penis, some
mm,
females are not. Some people have ambiguous genitals. It shouldn't be up to a doctor to tell you who you are.
no, I agree. I do recognize that we're sort of coming out of the dark ages around this issue for in some ways. I raised my grandchild who's 23, going on 24 this year, and have had the experience of meeting her friends. And you know, uh, unlike my childhood, and I'm assuming this would be true for your childhood, and I think we talked about this before too, is that when I get introduced to her friends, I get told their name, I get told their gender, I get told their sexual orientation, um, and it all is sort of naturally said. It's not a big deal. It just gives me this sort of blanket piece of information that I know how to interact with these people. And for me, it's a signal, this huge flag, that goes, that says we've done a lot in this society, that we've come from a situation where I, on the prairies, am not even able to acknowledge in any way being attracted to a woman, to now where children are just easily and in a relaxed way, without any shame, without any fear, just saying, this is who I am. And
And that's absolutely how it should be. And that's with the stigma around sexuality, gender, and mental health, we can lump that in there as well. That there just shouldn't be any stigma around talking about any of those.
right, I agree. We just need to take a little break, folks, but we'll be right back. And I'm going to talk a little bit more with Jodi about stigma and what we all deal with stigma. If you have a mental health challenge on some level, there is stigma. But I want to talk about what you've gone through, Jodi. So everybody just give us a few moments and we'll be right back.
It's estimated that 1 in 2 Canadians will be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime. For many, the physical, emotional, and financial burdens are heavy. The Volunteer Cancer Drivers Society ensures they never have to worry about a ride to and from treatment, offering safe, reliable, and free transportation for all patients. Now they're expanding their service across the mainland, and they need more volunteer drivers to join their fleet. If you have a vehicle, a valid driver's license with at least 5 years of experience, and a passion for helping those in need, the Volunteer Cancer Drivers Society would love to have you. Visit volunteercancerdrivers.ca to learn more.
You're listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and I'm chatting with Jodi Gray, who is the first transgendered person to win a Courage to Come Back award. Again, congratulations on your award, Jodi. I wanted to talk a little bit about stigma. I think it's something we don't talk enough about. And certainly anybody who has a mental health challenge deals with stigma on some level, some place where you're not able to define what's true for you, or something is taken away from you because somebody's afraid of you or afraid of your diagnoses. What kind of stigma do you go through because you are transgendered? And is that an okay term for me to say, or is that?
Yeah, because I'm trans, because I'm transgender.
Okay.
That's perfectly fine. Yes.
Okay. All right. If I say something that is not okay, please feel free to correct me. I'm happily learning here.
I will.
Okay, good. So what kind of stigma have you gone through?
So as far as being trans, it's I get comments, microaggressions certainly when I'm on the streets, and get called sir quite a bit over the phone, which I can understand my voice might be deeper than the typical female, but they really shouldn't be using any pronouns if they don't know me.
Mm-hmm.
They can just use my name or just skip the pronouns altogether.
Mm-hmm.
When I first transitioned, I think shopping for clothing was a very intimidating thing. And before I had any female, I'm putting that in quotes, clothes, I had to wear my male clothes and into a store that sold only women's clothes. And I was yelled at by the customer service person in the store, yelled at from across the store, and she said, "We only sell women's clothes." And everyone in the store looked up at me, and I was so embarrassed that I just turned around and left. I think now I would probably say something back to her, but at the time I was just so embarrassed, and I was just getting used to being female, and actually getting used to presenting as female in public, and yeah, it just mortified me. So I left the store and never went back to that store again.
I don't blame you. I hope a lot of people didn't go back to that store again. Why do you think people? Well, I just want to go back a little bit, because I know that one of the things we talked about before was that you had housing when you transitioned, and in transitioning, you discovered that your landlord was transphobic.
I did, yes. I was living in a basement suite, so my landlord lived above me in the house, and the landlord was very friendly to me before I transitioned, and would had a big garden and would bring me vegetables from the garden every summer, and we would chat. But as soon as I transitioned, that all ended, and it became a very uncomfortable place to live. So the landlord didn't talk to me anymore. Sort of not ignored, but averted his eyes when I came around, like he didn't even want to look at me.
He
And
erased you. He just erased you.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, but I couldn't afford to move out because the housing prices in Vancouver,
Hmm.
and it was a very affordable place to live. So I had to live in a place that I didn't exactly feel safe for quite a few years.
That's actually very stressful. That's a very stressful thing to do. I did that for 3 years, and the person that I didn't feel safe about lived over my head, and it took me a long time to process that and move beyond it. So I'm sorry you went through that. Um, you have good housing now?
I have good housing now. Yes, fortunately, the company that I work for is open to co-op for their workers, and yeah, I'm living in a great place now. So I get along with all of my neighbors, and we all work for the same company, and we all go through similar things in our jobs, so we can relate to each other, and it's fabulous. Yeah.
Well, that's good. But everybody needs to have safe housing. It's too hard if you don't. We are witnessing right now a lot of backlash about a lot of things. I heard this term yesterday on the news where somebody is saying it's the Great Reset. And I went, oh my God, that makes so much sense. So we've gone through, learning and progressing and growing and sort of embracing new ideas and moving along this path of acceptance in the world and safe and making people safe from harm and all kinds of things. And it just feels like we're going backwards around the abortion issue and but also when it comes to trans issues. There is right now currently in the United States 557 bills in 49 states that are anti-trans bills, and 87 of them have passed, 106 have failed, but 364 are still active. We have right now in Canada, we have a far right party's policy that they're putting forward on radical gender ideology. And they have a plan that they want to modify the criminal code to outlaw any gender affirming care, as well as forbidding things like biological men from entering women's bathrooms and shelters and prisons and change rooms, it says here, which always infuriates me because my worst offender was a woman. And so I don't know why they're not doing the equivalent back, biological women not being able to go in men's bathrooms. But um, this has got to be hard, to live as a trans woman and see what's happening in the States, see what's happening to people who are trans people in the States who are no longer able to access gender affirming care, who are having to flee the state they live in because it's not safe. What is this like? How does it, how does all of this hit you?
It's very difficult. It sometimes I just have to turn off the news to not watch it because it is so difficult. I one of the things, so I'm 54 years old, and one of the things I see is that the lawmakers in the states that are trying to pass these laws are my age. They're people that I could have gone to school with,
Mm,
and they're passing these laws against, yeah, they may as well be against me.
mhm.
Um, yeah, it's really disappointing to see all of this happening, and it's like we talked about the mental health concerns of trans people. The suicide rates for trans people are very high.
Mhm.
The care that we get as far as any medical transition that a person decides to do is life-saving care.
Yes.
So it is vitally necessary care, and it's not something to be played around with by the politicians. So I I don't understand what they think the big threat is. There's, as far as I know, there's never been a case of a trans woman harassing or attacking a woman in the washroom. And yet the washroom seemed to be the big battlefield
I know, I'm sorry,
that,
I laugh, but that's ridiculous. It's so, I've been in the washroom with a trans woman, nothing happened. We just went to the bathroom and washed our hands and left. That was it.
exactly. And if they know that I'm trans in the washroom, then they're doing something they shouldn't be, not me.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I agree. So yeah, so let's look at some stats. The stats I found was that 41% report being depressed, 20% had attempted suicide. I think that you had mentioned that was something that was true for you as well.
Yes.
And 46% reported being having self-injured. And that those were for youth, and that those stats were higher than for any cisgendered youth out there. And this is what is the key or the core to, not that people who are transgendered can't have other mental health issues, such as yourself with bipolar 2, but being accosted with hate and having things taken away from you out of stigma, and growing up in that kind of environment is going to impact on your mental health. It doesn't make you crazy. It's a natural response to trauma. And so from what I can tell, we need to provide protection, not absolutely terrify people a little bit more, just being who they are.
Absolutely, absolutely. And having to live as someone that you're not, and you're not, really adds a lot of stress to your life. And I can say that from firsthand experience at that. And it's not a comfortable place to be. And with some of the laws being passed now, it can really give you a feeling of hopelessness that I'll never be able to live as who I really am. And that's definitely not good for the youth today either.
No. And it's actually makes me feel very sad that we're asking people to conform to something that is not real for them. Why? Do you have any idea why? Why is this happening? Why are people needing to take this stance? Do you have any insight into that?
I'm afraid not. I think some people are just afraid of something that they don't understand. Um, I really struggle to come up with reasons why they would pass such hateful laws as this, when trans people, by all accounts, are 1% of the population. I mean, we're not a big threat to the rest of the world, and certainly aren't going to take over the world at 1% of the population. We're just trying to live our lives and be ourselves.
Yeah, it is kind of striking to me, and I confess I don't understand it. I don't get it what the big hairy deal is, because so what? If all you're doing is being yourself, then that's an incredible message right there, to be yourself. It's too bad that it has to be a struggle. And unfortunately, we just need to take a little break, folks, but we'll be right back.
Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes, little boxes, little boxes all the same. There's a green one and a pink one and a blue one and a yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky and they all look just the same. And the people in the houses all went to the university, and they all got put in boxes, little boxes all the same. And there's doctors and there's lawyers and business executives, and they all get put in boxes and they all come out the same. and they all play on the golf course and drink their martini dry, and they all have pretty children, and the children go to school, and the children go to summer camp, and then to the university, and they all get put in boxes, and they all come out the same. And the boys go into business and marry and raise a family, and they all get put in boxes, little boxes all the same. There's a green one and a pink one and a blue one and a yellow one, and they all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same.
You're listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm having the pleasure of speaking with Jodi Gray, who is the most current 2023 Courage to Come Back Award winner for mental health. And she's also the first transgendered person to win in any category there. So again, congratulations on the award. I know these awards are given to people who are doing a lot of work in the community, taking what they've gone through and transforming it into action. So tell us a little bit about what you are working on, Jodi.
Certainly. So my actual paid work is I manage a housing project in the downtown east side for transgender, gender diverse, and two-spirit people, which is the first of its kind in Western Canada. And it's serves as a safe place for people to live who have transitioned or are going through their transition now. And yeah, it's just been a fabulous project. We have 23 rooms, and I get to work every day with 23 fabulous people. And yeah, it's just a real pleasure. And as far as volunteer work goes, I'm on the board of Catherine White Holman Wellness Clinic. I'm on the board of Citizens for Accessible Neighborhoods, and it's a disability group that looks to make the world more accessible for people with disabilities. I worked on a research project, which was I headed a research project, which was looking at making the mental health care system more trans inclusive. And that was an unusual thing because it's mostly academics that head these projects. And I decided to take one on myself with put together a team and actually did the project myself with some people advising me on the ins and outs of it.
What does that look like to make did you say medical field or mental health field more trans inclusive?
Yeah, the mental health field more trans inclusive.
Okay.
I think when I went through everything, the doctors just wanted to look at the fact that I was trans and didn't want to look at me as a whole person.
Right.
And I think that's a big part of it is getting the doctors to realize that trans people are people, and we have a lot of issues that have nothing to do with being trans. I had one doctor that the first time I went to hospital, and I was scared to death going to hospital the first time for suicidal ideation, and didn't know what was going to happen or anything. And the doctor started out by asking me who I was attracted to. And
Why?
I said, no one. And she said, well, if you were going to be attracted to someone, who would it be? And again, in my mind, I'm thinking she's talking about a specific person.
Right.
And I said, well, no one right now. And she said, well, would it be male or female? And my first thought was, what does that have to do with anything? First of all, sexuality and gender are two separate things. One doesn't have anything to do with the other.
Yeah.
And it had nothing to do with why I was in the hospital. So I couldn't understand why she was asking these questions. And it's issues like that, using dead names,
Yes.
which are a lot of times on the health card if people can't afford to get their names changed legally.
Right.
It scares trans people away from the healthcare system. And there was a study, and I forget the percentage, but a very high percentage of trans people will avoid going to the emergency room to seek help because of the treatment that they get there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, you
so
only need to be
that's
treated poorly a few times before you don't have the strength I mean, you go to the emergency room because you're sick, because you are not okay, and therefore you are vulnerable, and you're not strong. And to walk into a place feeling sick and vulnerable and not strong and be dealing with crap, it's just too hard. It makes complete sense that people would avoid it if that's what's happening. The other thing that I wanted to just mention, this whole issue of who are you attracted to, it harkens back to, I don't know about men, but I do know about women who were locked up in mental health institutions, asylums way back because they were lesbian. And that was considered a mental health diagnosis. So the fact that you're still dealing with it on some level means that we haven't gotten past that a whole lot, that they're still getting stuck back there. Certainly it's out of the DSM. It's no longer there. So
that's right. That's right. And that's one of my volunteer opportunities that I work with is the interdisciplinary health mentor program at UBC. And I work with 3 or 4 students from different health disciplines at UBC. And we sit down and have frank conversations. And I'm very open to them about everything and allow them to ask me whatever they would like to ask me. So when they encounter trans patients after they graduate, they'll know how to treat them, and I think it's a fabulous program, and I think I'm very lucky to be a part of it.
Given that experience, what would you say to people now who are nurses, doctors, mental health practitioners? What's your biggest advice in telling them how to treat, or what kind of things not to do with somebody who is transgendered?
I think the biggest thing is to listen to the person. If if a transgender person, if a person tells you they're male or female, listen to what they're saying, listen to their preferred names, and don't necessarily go by the name on their health card, their legal name. Treat them like they want to be treated, and treat them like a whole person.
I just find that incredibly sad that is the message that we need to tell people who are in the helping profession, because that advice is true for everybody. It's no different,
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's the big thing is I know transgender people are no different from anyone else. We're just people.
One of the things that you said that night at the award ceremony is something about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, yes. So I was in a peer group meeting, peer drop-in meeting, and someone told me that I had to be a politician or a lawyer or a doctor to really affect any change in the systems. And I took a lot of offense at that. And part of the reason I did the research project was to set out to show that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. And I really believe that's true, that you don't have to hold a position of power to affect change in this world. So we all can do it. And if I can do it, anybody can, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And I can help you do the thing you want to do, and you can help me do the thing I want to do. And, we can just be ordinary people helping each other to do extraordinary things and make change happen. That's good for all of us, for sure.
Absolutely.
You have not seen your son since he was 2. I'm very sorry to hear that. And I know that you don't have any way of reaching him. Is there something you would say to James if by some chance he would be able to hear this show at some point in the future?
Well, if James was listening to the show, I want him to know that I love him. I never stopped loving him. And I've missed him every day that I've not been around him. And I'm not sure what James grew up hearing about me, but if you're able to get in touch with me, then please do, and see for yourself who I am.
Mhm.
As I love you more than anything.
Yeah, that's a priceless message. Thank you. Well, thank you, Jodi, for your time and your experience, and for what you're giving back to this community. It's very vital, very necessary, and very needed.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. And we'll be right back.
Co-op Radio is listener supported and listener owned. As a Co-op Radio member, you can join the broadcasters who create and present radio shows, as well as have a say in the station's management. You'll own a part of the station. All this for just as little as $5 a month, and tax deductible too. For details, go to coopradio.org and press the donate button. That's coopradio.org.
You're listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and right now I have the pleasure of speaking with Fraser McKenzie from Coast Mental Health. Welcome, Fraser.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I was hoping to have a conversation with you about the services and things that are available for folks through Coast Mental Health. Can you let us know what those things offer?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Coast Mental Health's been around since about 1972. It started off with some community housing. It was really linked in with the consumer movement of the early 70s that we associate with the Mental Patients Association. Some of those initial forays into advocacy and autonomy around individuals with lived experience who were really trying to carve out a space for themselves. And Coast recognized that from the outset and has grown exponentially since. I am aware of a few things acutely, namely the peer support program, which I manage with Coast, but I also collaborate with a variety of others, including the outreach team, the Coast Clubhouse, the young adult program, and a few others that are a little bit further beyond my purview. The resource center out of which I'm based is at 1225 Seymour. It's about a 20-year-old building. We had an initial sort of resource center on Richard Street earlier, but they built a dedicated building, a two-story building with a wonderful art room, a garden patio, a variety of offices, an industrial kitchen, about 25 years ago, and it's been running strongly ever since. Within the Coast Resource Center, we have the outreach team, we have mental health workers, we have a variety of psychosocial programming, the peer support program, etc. The Coast Clubhouse is at 295 East 11th. It's an older established building just down from the Recovery Club. It is a member run, and it also houses within the same geography the head office, our human resources department, our accounting department, etc. The clubhouse welcomes people through their own programming. They have a transitional employment program. The young adult program is based there. And yeah, there's computers, there's a food program, there's housing resources. But again, it really focuses on the purview around the membership, around the leadership of the membership, around the lens of the lived experience piece, and it is intrinsically informed by that.
Right. Can you tell us a little bit about the peer support initiative?
Sure. I joined Coast in 2011. The peer support initiative started a couple of years before that. So 2009, a gentleman named John Massam, in collaboration with my director, Tracy Rapanos, established Coast Peer Support Program based along the guidelines of pre-existing psychosocial ambitions. They created a curriculum, they trained peer support workers, created a practicum format, and then also included them into vocational ambitions. I stepped into John's role about 2013, 2014 as a program coordinator, and I've been at the helm ever since. And essentially, it's really honoring the wisdom and the strength of those of us with lived experience. I have my own lived experience with mood disorder and the substance delving in a variety of
Substance
formats.
delving. I like that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they're often concurrent, right? We often
Right.
try to manage our phenomenon through a variety of different mechanisms.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's the human experience, but it's the human experience through the perspective of people who have to navigate systems that aren't necessarily friendly, that aren't necessarily welcoming, that can be violent, that can be stigmatizing, but using our experience navigating those bits and pieces, and also our access to those systems, which can come from a violent perspective or a highly privileged perspective, in order to help support other people that may be starting that journey.
Right.
So, I mean, recovery is a bit of a loaded term, and we're all on kind of different journeys. Peer support really is trying to utilize our lived experience as something unique and wisdom-filled.
So you're basically training peer support workers from folks who have lived experience. How many people go through the program a year?
Well, a cohort is typically a dozen folks.
Okay,
So we
cool.
have a couple of different groups. We have a young adult initiative, which would be, say, 19 to 30 years old. And then we have the conventional training, which would be maybe late 20s upwards.
Right.
And they're kind of tailored uniquely. And we try to do 3 cohorts a year. The classroom portion is about 2.5 or 3 months, 3 hours a day, 3 days a week. And then we add in a practicum component, which is about 30 or 40 hours or 3 months following that. And if that's done successfully and the competencies are being exercised and oxygenated in a meaningful way, then we certify people in a positive way, and then head them out into vocational and job placements, usually 6-month job placements.
Wow, that's wonderful. Tell me about the clubhouse. You said it's member run. Can anybody walk in the front door, or do they need to be referred?
I'm not an expert on the clubhouse. I would
Okay.
recommend chatting with Simone Frey, who's the manager there. My understanding of any clubhouse model, and Coast is certainly part of that, is that it is intrinsically member run. So you're really leaning upon the expertise and the needs and the resources that are defined by the membership. So
Right.
it has to be a collaborative and self-defining sort of a thing.
That's cool. And the resource center, what I know about the resource center is that I do know Leaf Evans, who does paint in the art studio and has for quite some time. So I've been there, I've been up to the art studio, I've kind of seen the lay of the land. He's told me that it's changed, it's made bigger, they've taken down a wall or something. But when I went through there were a lot of people there. Some were hanging out, some were in the art studio, some were doing other things. What kinds of things can people come, and can they walk in the front door? Or do they need to be referred? Does it need to be arranged ahead of time?
Anybody can walk in. I think ideally, over time, we get to know people, we develop relationships, and we encourage people to become members so that we can work with them a little bit more intimately. We can get to know them. It is all relational work. So in order to substantiate and create that connection, some consistency is usually beneficial. And then we can kind of help navigate goals and support people in a meaningful way.
Right.
So membership is encouraged. Membership isn't contingent upon a diagnosis. It really is about identifying people who could benefit from a space that offers access to food, that offers access to shelter, that offers access to mental health workers who are well versed in aligning people with supports and resources, whether it be housing or income assistance or anything else. But also within the framework of the resource center, there are some really, really cool programs that engage people, and they're often peer-led, and they often reflect the interests and the passions of the people that are attending. So it may be a gardening group, it may be a group that involves polymer clay or pottery or drawing. There could be a music appreciation piece. There could be karaoke. There could be a femmes and thems group, like a non-binary group. What we really encourage the peers to do is to bring their interests to the table, their own aptitudes, and then to propose ideas that could be well reflected and that will align with the interests of the people that are attending.
That sounds marvelous, actually. It is something that's very needed. Tell me what Coast Mental Health is there for, because these are just a few of the programs of Coast Mental Health.
That's right. I mean,
If we want to look at it from an overall perspective, I know there are some things that you mentioned that are self-referral, like the clubhouse and the resource center, but there is another part of Coast Mental Health that does a wider range of things. And I'm hoping that we can just touch on that a little bit, even though people can't self-refer to it.
Yeah, I mean, Coast Mental Health has a variety of facets to it. There are the rehab and recovery program that's out at Riverview. There's a forensic program. There's young adult programs and housing programs and modular housing programs in Maple Ridge. We started very, very small and have grown. Well, particularly the last 3 years, we've almost doubled in size. The housing piece, I think, was the initial foray, and that's something that we've been focusing on longitudinally, and has been very, very successful. Coast, ultimately for me, has represented a nonprofit organization that has truly taken the ground up philosophy to heart, which was a part of a number of movements in the late 60s and early 70s.
Yes.
But that thread, that pulse maintains, and I think that spirit is part of the reason why perhaps our peer support program has maintained.
Yeah, I talk to a lot of people, and of course, one of the things that they say over and over and over is that the peer support, the one-on-one chatting with other people who have the same kind of lived experience as they do, is one of the most profound things that they have experienced, and then one of the most healing things. And we don't want to underestimate the importance of therapy or any of those things, but I just want to put my own little support in there for peer support. It is a very valuable, very profound and powerful tool in the healing process.
Yes, yeah, no, I agree, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. You also do some street outreach, and I know we're nearing the end of our time here, but I did want to ask you about that. You do work with unhoused people?
That's correct. We work out of the downtown south. The resource center is based there. That's where the outreach team is. That is a service that anybody can access from any origin point. So you can literally walk in off the street and access the outreach department. You do not need to be a member. You do not need to be known to us. You can simply attend the resource center, speak with an outreach worker, and investigate and pursue things like income assistance, OAS, PWD, rental supplements, crisis grants, housing initiatives, whether it be supportive or semi-supportive or independent or market. There's the shelter aid for elderly residents. We help with ID. We help with community resources, clothing-wise and food-wise. They're an exceptional team. There's generally 5 people that are involved. And that's been something that we've been doing effectively with BC Housing since the ictus of the resource center.
Wow, that's wonderful. Fraser, thank you so much for coming and chatting with me about this very important organization and the work that they do. Clearly would suggest to anybody who is living with a mental health challenge to check out their resources and what they have to offer. Fraser, you had an email address that somebody could reach you at.
Sure. Peer support at coastmentalhealth.com. Will reach me immediately. And if you're interested in outreach services, then I would recommend emailing outreachresourcecenter@coastmentalhealth.com.
Okay, I'm going to say those again. So outreach resource center at coastmentalhealth, all one word.com, and peer support at coastmentalhealth, all one word again.com. Did I get that right?
That's it. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Fraser. And
thanks very much, Bernadine.
Yeah, you're welcome.
CFRO has the most reggae and Caribbean music of any station in the Vancouver area. Start your week off with some reggae oldies on Tuesdays from 10:30 a.m. to noon with Level the Vibes. Roots Reggae is on Fridays from midnight to 7 a.m. The Reggae Show from 6 to 8:30 p.m. every Saturday, followed by Caribbean Sounds from 8:30 to 11 p.m. On the first and second Saturday of every month, it's a Reggae Extended Mix from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. and then Super Mix on the third, fourth, and fifth Saturday on CFRO 100.5 FM, Vancouver Cooperative Radio.
You've been listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and that's our show. Rethreading Madness is now aired on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM, on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. We re-air on CJUM in Winnipeg on Mondays at 9 a.m. and on CKXU in Lethbridge on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. You can also find us on the Mental Health Radio Network and wherever you download your podcasts. My thanks to Jodi Gray, the 2023 Courage to Come Back Award winner for mental health, for chatting with me today. The song Little Boxes, written by Malvina Reynolds and performed by Pete Seeger, was chosen by Jodi. It is a satirical comment about the development of the middle class with its conformist attitudes, which push society towards uniformity. To Reynolds and Ulrich, thanks for the gift of your music. But more importantly, and as always, my thanks goes out to you for joining us today. Stay safe out there. You've just listened to Rethreading Madness, where we dare to change how we think about mental health. We air live on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM, every Tuesday at 5 p.m. or online at coopradio.org. If you have questions or feedback about this program, or want to share your story, or have something to say to us, we want to hear from you. You can reach us by email, rethreadingmadness@coopradio.org. This is Bernadine Fox. We'll be back next week. Until then.
When I've never been further, knowing what the hell I'm gonna do. When I can't seem to find my way under or over or through. Just when I'm ready to give up the fight, there you are when we turn out the lights, and it's alright, it's alright, don't you worry, it'll be alright. Why do I always believe it when you tell me everything's gonna be alright? Yeah. Why don't I wonder how you know? Well, surely you don't have all of the facts. You could be just making it up. Why don't I ever think of that? It's some kind of magic in the words that you breathe, saying, baby, take it from me. It's alright, it's alright, don't you worry, it'll be alright. Why do I always believe it when you tell me everything's gonna be alright? Everything's gonna be alright. With anyone else, it's such a cliche, just words people say to be nice. Or some